Thanks for joining me.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Let's see. So, about ending cash bail. So, why did you feel it was important to do? And now that it's ended, what will it mean for our community?
I think cash bail has always been an imperfect solution to get people to come to court. It creates two different justice systems: a justice system for the wealthy, who can easily pay their bail and get out and not have to actually have jail time, and can await their court trial at home in the comfort with their family, still keeping their job. And then we've created a justice system for those who lack wealth and therefore lack the ability to pay their bail, and have a very different experience where they get to await their court trial sitting in a jail cell, losing their job, almost guaranteed, not being able to provide for their family, not being there for their kids, and which that of course creates a domino effect that makes it even more likely that those people are going to commit crimes in the future, because we have made them even more economically unstable. We've made their family unstable. So cash bail is an extremely flawed way, and that's why we made this move, and there's other ways that we can make sure people are showing up for their court dates that are much more effective and much more just that we're pursuing instead.
What are some of those other ways?
Well, we're now funding, as part of the FY20 budgets, a notification system through our municipal court that's going to rely mainly on text messaging to send text reminders to people that their court date's coming up. A great thing about this is we're talking about not just texting the individual who's been arrested, but also we'll get the telephone number of their wife or their mother or their father, so that we can also be sending notifications to them, so that you have people around you who care about you also reminding you, making sure that you're accountable and show up to that court date. And this has been put in place in New York City and a number of other places, and shown to be very effective, and again, doesn't create the economic instability that the cash bail system does.
Do you know how long people were usually waiting in jail for their court dates?
They usually weren't waiting a super long time before hearing, but I mean, most of them a few days. But there were some people just chronically who could not pay their bail and chose, we say chose, but were put in a situation where they just had to stay in jail until their court matters were resolved. And so I know that there was some that was, whenever a bail was put in place and a signature bond was not available, definitely sat in there for weeks awaiting. So.
Do you know how many people will benefit from this change? How many people had to pay cash bail before?
I don't know exact numbers. I know it's in the dozens, if not in the hundreds. The reason it's a little bit difficult is that some of those cases were dealt with differently. Some of them were already getting signature bonds just because the judge was seeing that as a priority already. So it's hard to say exactly, but I've definitely talked to a number of people, public defenders, judges, prosecutors, who say that they all know specific cases that they have dealt with in the past, that this is going to help individuals that they've worked with who needed this kind of help. So it's going to have a definite impact on our neighbors and the people that we live around us. And again, it's going to make our community more stable and more just.
What kinds of offenses are we talking about?
We're talking about these are local code ordinances violations, and that is, I think, where the biggest confusion is actually what are we seeing, and that's what the Commission has oversight on here. We don't have the purview on. We don't have the purview on higher misdemeanors that are set by the state or set by the magistrate judge. So these would be the local ordinances such as public intoxication. That's been one of the ones that people have been arrested on the most, on the local ordinances. And we're going to see, even in those cases, now we've changed it where not only are we getting rid of the bail, but we're moving towards a citation. So not only are they going to be not going to be arrested, taken to jail, and have a bail, but most of these people aren't going to be arrested at all. Where in the past they had been. And so it's going to be, not only are we keeping bail away from an issue they have to deal with, but we're actually keeping arrest in general away from them. So
if I'm hearing you right, it would have been possible in the past for someone to, get a little too drunk, public intoxication, and then go to jail and not be able to bond out and be in there for weeks? Like, that was a possibility? Like,
that was a possibility if they weren't granted the signature ordinance. Now, from what I've heard, usually the judges and other individuals, if that was going on, would try to intervene. But then, of course, that created the ability to do that required so many people and moving parts in place to have that just outcome happen. Everybody from like on the jail level with the sheriff's department to the judge or the public defenders, all these different people had to be involved just to have that just outcome happen. Now we're just saying, like, why even have the system in place? So we're moving this instead. Disorderly conduct is another one that's a local ordinance that people have been arrested on and have had to sit in the jail for before, that we're now getting rid of. That's another big one. Now, it is important to put out with, especially those two that were the most common, if the violence is present during the citation period from the officer does have the ability, if they feel like they are a danger to themselves or an immediate danger to others, to still take them into custody instead of giving the citation. But the difference here, though, is if they are taken to jail because of that danger to themselves, when they are sober or have calmed down, they will again be released without having to pay bail. They will be released on their own recognizance with a signature bond. So it's like, no matter what the situation is, it's going to be a better outcome for all individuals who are being arrested for these local ordinances.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the process of getting this passed. So the end result was unanimous.
It was, yeah.
And was it difficult to convince any of your fellow commissioners? And if not, why do you think that this didn't happen until now?
I think with the cash bail, the momentum was created where it would be difficult for any commissioner to vote no. And I think that is a great model of showing the inside-outside pushes happening simultaneously. People on the outside of the community, which, of course, I was one of those people just a few months ago, and I spoke, for cash bail to be rid of in City Hall in the past, along with numerous other individuals with Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, Athens for Everyone, a lot of different groups, the Interfaith Hospitality Network, like all these individuals coming together, and also some people speaking to it behind the rail. But especially during the elections that happened in 2018 with myself, Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Thornton, Davenport, and Commissioner Edwards, basically all these people, and of course Mayor Gertz also speaking to it during his campaign, it kind of created such momentum and such a push that it was not a politically savvy move to oppose it any longer, even if somebody did in the past. But I also think during that process of us creating the momentum and talking about those things during the campaign trail and having advocates talk about them, I think it also, convinced anybody who had doubts about this, at least on the commissioner level. And, it's also, I think, put away doubts with the judges and the legal teams that have to actually use this system. And it created a situation and a culture where people were instead looking for ways of how can we make this happen, rather than trying to look for excuses of why it couldn't happen. And I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be doing all the time with different issues. And I think this is a really great example of how you can do that. I think it's a little different with some other issues, like possibly like inmate labor, where there is more resistance maybe with some of the commissioners. But I think, again, it just shows that, like, politicians want to make the politically correct move often, and a lot of times the public has to make the culture where the just outcome is the politically best move to make.
Okay. Thank you. Already answered my next question, but it was, do you think it's more important to have regular people pushing from the outside, good elected officials who listen on the inside, or do we need both?
Yeah, obviously we need both of those things happening. The only way you can make sure politicians are being held accountable is if the public is holding them accountable. I think you could have the best politician in the world who has a fantastic platform, but if they're put into office and nobody ever checks in on to see if the work's actually being done and those things they promised are being done, I think there's a good chance they're probably not, So I think that has to happen both. And again, on the other side of it, you can have fantastic activist networks and advocates who are very informed and educated making pushes on issues. But if you have, politicians, elected officials who refuse to respond or listen, you're not going to get anywhere. And hopefully you're going to get those people out of office, which sometimes that's what you have to do. So it definitely takes both, and a healthy amount of both is the best key to having this kind of just society.
So what are the next steps to reforming our criminal justice system? And how long do you think we have to go until we have a just system, in your opinion?
If I'm being honest, I doubt that we have a just system in my lifetime. But I do think we have a more just system, obviously, in my lifetime. And I think the key should be here is that every day, every week, every year, our system should be getting more just while we're on the pathway to having a completely just system. Next steps here is I think we grow this when it comes to the signature bonds, the OR bonds. And I think that's another big part of this that maybe isn't being talked about as much, that moving these local ordinance violations, while that's a small number of the people who are in our jails and stuff, it's the first step. It sets the example. It's the community saying, this is what we want, and we are already taking the first steps to get there. This does, encourage and push the magistrate judge to also look into what other misdemeanors that are at her level that she can move towards having as signature bonds instead. It puts pressure on the state and our state's elected officials to also be looking at, their bond schedules and saying, okay, how can we be making this more just? How can we be moving things away from getting people out of jail and instead keeping their jobs, staying at home with their families, being there for their children, and still showing up for their court date? Because that is the ultimate thing here. That's all we're trying to do, is make sure people show up to their court dates. There are definitely better ways that we can do that rather than completely wrecking people's lives. And I think other steps that we can be taking are just, creating a citizen oversight board for our police, which we're working on now. And another thing that I'm excited about is working with the Solicitor General on a pre-arrest diversions system program that will also give another option whenever police officers say find somebody who has marijuana of under an ounce. Not only will they won't have to be cited, they won't be arrested. They'll be giving a summons to, as long as they opt into it, to go into a pre-arrest diversion program, and by doing that, they would pay a fee. If it's been habitual, they might have to enter some kind of drug treatment program. But that way, an arrest isn't even on their record. They can go and apply for a job years later and honestly say, I've never been arrested for a drug offense, if that's on their application. So I think that what we're trying to do here is make a safe society that looks the way we want it to be and is just the way we want it to be, that has the lowest negative impact on people, and is really just trying to help people rather than incarcerate them. And while we're limited to what we can do here on the county level, this commission and myself is committed to finding creative ways that we can take those next steps. Some of these things might be things that have already been done in other counties or other cities, like Clarkston, like a parallel ordinance. But again, like a pre-arrest diversion program is kind of a unique program. We might be inventing some new criminal justice reforms that have never been done anywhere else. And why not, right? I think Athens is a great place for us to be actually pushing the envelope, finding new ways to make our system just and make our system more compassionate.
Yeah, I've never heard of pre-arrest diversion before. Yeah. So is this different than getting a citation? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, because a citation is still like a court summons, so you still have to show up to court. And if you don't, of course, then you're, instead this would be basically an entering into, a voluntary entering into a program, which some of the things in the program would just simply require a fine, very similar to a citation. But then we also have the options to expand it out, say with potential issues where somebody with mental health issues breaks some kind of law, and it's obvious that's what's going on. There's a mental health crisis, and we have right now, and we're expanding our mental health teams with our police department. So instead of arresting them, which is not going to help them, that putting them in jail is not going to help that mental health crisis, they would also be given the opportunity to enter this into this pre-arrest diversion program with specific parameters dealing with mental health issues. And instead, they would be, probably assigned a caseworker, setting up treatment with advanced behavioral health, and that would be, so we're not punishing these people who are obviously going through a crisis. We're treating them or helping them, which is what our system should be doing in the first place. And we can also are talking about doing this pre-arrest diversion program for minors under the age of 18. So instead of arresting them, having some of their first experiences with our justice system be getting arrested and sitting in jail when you're 16 or 17, instead we would have this pre-arrest diversion program designed for them also, so they could go into that instead. Possibly do some volunteer work, possibly get set up with a mentor, different ways that we can do that, again, so that we're building those people up, making them better people, better residents of our county, instead of punishing them and likely putting them into a cycle that instead encourages more crime, encourages more economic instability. And instead we point out that there's some things going on here when they're younger. Let's resolve those things so that whenever they're adults, they're in better standing. So, yeah.
Cool. Do you have anything else that you want to say about this?
Oh, you had the question. Well, not about the question about inmate labor, but yeah.
One other question about inmate labor.
Yeah.
So I know you were trying to get funding for that into the 2020 budget. I just wanted to know if you have any status update on that. Like, will inmates be paid going forward?
I think the positive status update here is that while I don't think it was necessarily the case when I first started advocating for this in the budget process, a majority of the commission and also the mayor and the county manager's office have come along on this, and we're working to make this happen. We kind of made sure the language in the budget for that $150,000 that we put towards inmate labor programming, I think is our services, or benefit, I think is the word we use. We made sure that the language was loose enough that we could have this actually go towards a compensation package or a stipend package for them. And so that's definitely exciting that we have the funding there. We have the funding earmarked in a way that we can actually expend it that way. The one thing we still have to work on is with the Department of Corrections, who, of course, these inmate laborers are state prisoners that are basically first and foremost overseen by the Department of Corrections, but they're being held in our correctional facility here in Clarke County by our warden. But we have to find a way forward to work with the Department of Corrections where they're willing to support us in this. Right now, we're kind of at a period where we're trying to find out how that can happen. I am hopeful and optimistic that the Department of Corrections understands the benefits, again, that will help inmate laborers and help fight recidivism, which is shown in the 45 states who do compensate inmate laborers. But there's still some work to do there with ensuring that the Department of Corrections is willing to go along with us on this. Because as the way this inmate labor program works, we are definitely partnering with the Department of Corrections, and it would be very difficult and potentially impossible for us to move forward on without their cooperation.
So we're not asking for any money from them, right? This would be Athens-Clarke County money that we'd be giving.
It would be. This would be funding from Clarke County. Department of Corrections will not pay anything into this. I have made that very clear when discussing this with Department of Corrections officials. But they did pass a policy last year that said that inmate laborers would not be compensated. They thought it important enough to actually create a policy that said so. So that policy currently is on the books for the Department of Corrections. It is only a policy, it's not a law, it is a policy. And they seem to have concerns that, I'm not sure exactly. I can't really speak to their concerns. Again, to me, you look at the stats, you look at the situation, this would create these inmates to have better behavior while they're in our correctional facility, because it'll help their own morale, it'll help their self-worth with understanding, having a better idea of a work ethic that actually values their work. And again, it would give money to them when they got released that could go towards paying off their legal obligations they have to courts or whatever else. That could be a huge hindrance, and often is a huge hindrance, to people leaving prison. And again, making them economically unstable and increasing the likelihood they come back to jail. So if we put this stipend in place, it helps fight recidivism. It helps keep people more stabilized when they leave prison, so that they have more likelihood to have a stable home and a stable job. So to me, the benefits are obvious. The Department of Corrections does have some concerns that are not obvious to me. And I'm hoping that once we keep this discussion going, which is going to be happening here over the summer, that they'll move towards what I feel like is the obvious move, which is let Clarke County compensate their inmate laborers through a stipend program if we're going to fund that program. Again, yeah, the Department of Corrections will not be on the hook for any of those funds.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of strange why they would oppose that. Anyway, well, thanks so much for meeting with me.
Happy to be here.